What if I told you that the ancient Romans sometimes dined on roasted dormice stuffed with honey and nuts? Or that emperors competed to outdo each other with feasts that included flamingo tongues and peacock brains? It sounds like something out of a bizarre cooking show, but it was real. The Roman table was a stage, and food was the performance. Some Romans lived on nothing more than bread and porridge, while others ate meals so extravagant they seem almost unbelievable today. Food is one of the most intimate ways to understand a civilization. What people eat and what they don't eat tells us about their culture, their values, and even their politics. For the Romans, food wasn't just survival, it was identity, status, and empire itself. So in this video, we're going to step into the kitchens, taverns, and banquet halls of ancient Rome. We'll uncover what ordinary citizens ate on a daily basis, what strange delicacies were served at the tables of emperors, and how Rome's food reflected the sheer scale of its empire. By the end, you'll see that Roman cuisine was more than just meals. It was a reflection of Rome itself, its wealth, its inequality, its innovation, and even its excess. Our journey will take us through 4 chapters. First, we'll see how food was divided by class. Then, we'll look at the staples that kept Romans fed, from soldiers to senators. After that, we'll explore the strangest, most shocking dishes of the Roman elite. And finally, we'll discover how food itself became a symbol of Roman conquest and power. When we talk about what the Romans ate, the first thing to understand is that their meals were not the same across society. Rome was a civilization of extreme contrasts. At the very bottom, the poor, who made up the majority of the population, lived on what was cheap, filling, and easy to produce. Bread was their lifeline. In fact, the phrase "bread and circuses" captures this reality. If the government could give the masses grain to bake bread and entertain them with spectacles in the arena, they could keep social order. Alongside bread, the poor often relied on a kind of porridge made from barley or millet, sometimes with a little vegetable or bean mixed in. Meat was a rare luxury, and fish was often salted and preserved rather than fresh. Their diet, though monotonous, was practical. It kept them alive and working. In contrast, the wealthy Roman elite had access to a dazzling variety of foods that showcased the empire's reach and their own power. Senators, wealthy merchants, and emperors ate not just to survive, but to impress. For them, meals were status symbols. Exotic spices, rare cuts of meat, and imported delicacies signaled their prestige. Where the poor man might be eating cabbage stew, the aristocrat might be dining on oysters from the British coast, figs from Africa, or pheasant from the far reaches of Asia Minor. Class defined not only what you ate, but how you ate. The poor ate quickly, often standing, while elites reclined on couches, fed course after course in lavish banquets that could last hours. This class divide in food also mirrored Rome's political power. The elite dined on foods that required trade networks, slaves, and wealth to acquire, while the poor were given subsidized grain to keep them from rebellion. Eating in Rome was never just about hunger, it was about identity, power, and the vast inequalities that structured Roman society. Despite all the exotic tales we hear, at its core, the Roman diet rested on 3 pillars: bread, olive oil, and wine. Bread, or panis, came in countless varieties. Archaeologists have even uncovered carbonized loaves from Pompeii, scored into 8 slices and stamped with the baker's mark. It was eaten at every meal, sometimes dipped in oil, sometimes flavored with herbs, sometimes softened in wine. Olive oil was equally vital. It wasn't just used for cooking, but also as a dip, a preservative, even as a base for sauces. Good olive oil was a treasure, and Rome's demand for it fueled entire economies in Spain, North Africa, and Greece. Wine, too, was omnipresent. Romans did not drink it the way we do today. It was almost always diluted with water, flavored with herbs, honey, or even seawater. Strong wine drunk straight was considered barbaric. Vegetables and legumes were also daily staples for both rich and poor. Lentils, chickpeas, beans, and cabbage were common. The Roman cookbook attributed to Apicius mentions recipes using leeks, onions, cucumbers, and asparagus. Fruit was eaten fresh in summer. Apples, figs, pears, plums, grapes, and dried in winter. Honey, not sugar, was the primary sweetener, and it flavored everything from pastries to wine. The fascinating part about these staples is how universal they were. A Roman soldier on the frontier in Germania might be eating a rough bread and olive oil ration, much like a senator in Rome, though with different quality and preparation. What unified Romans across class was not luxury foods, but this shared backbone of Mediterranean staples. Bread, oil, and wine were more than food. They were cultural symbols. They represented Rome's agricultural system, its trade, and its values. To be Roman was, in part, to eat this way, and the diet followed the legions wherever they marched. Now, here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. The Roman elite were not just satisfied with bread, oil, and wine. They wanted to astonish their guests with dishes that pushed the boundaries of taste and extravagance. Imagine being invited to a banquet and being served a platter of dormice, small rodents stuffed with nuts, honey, and herbs roasted until golden. Yes, you heard that right. Stuffed dormice were considered a delicacy. Roman gourmets also prized flamingo tongues, peacock brains, and livers from fattened geese. Exotic birds, particularly parrots and ostriches, were roasted whole. Jellyfish, sea urchins, and other strange seafoods found their way onto elite tables. This was not about flavor alone. It was about spectacle. If you were a Roman senator, you didn't want your guests to remember the taste. You wanted them to remember the performance. The rarer and more shocking the food, the greater your prestige. Dishes from the famous Roman gourmand Apicius reveal recipes that combine sweet and savory in ways that seem bizarre to us today. Fish cooked in honey sauces, pork seasoned with fruit, and all heavily doused in garum, the pungent fermented fish sauce that Romans put on almost everything. Garum was made in massive vats along the Mediterranean coast, where fish guts were left to ferment in the sun. Its sharp, salty taste flavored everything from meats to desserts. Banquets became competitions of excess. One emperor, Elagabalus, is said to have served meals consisting only of beans, another only of bird dishes, to keep his guests constantly surprised. These were acts of power, proof that Rome controlled the world's resources, and that its wealthiest citizens could summon the rarest creatures to their tables. To eat flamingo tongue was not about enjoying flamingo tongue. It was about showing that you had the reach, wealth, and power to obtain it. For the Roman elite, eating was not just nourishment, it was theatre. The convivia, or banquets, were staged affairs where every detail mattered. Picture a grand triclinium, a dining hall where guests reclined on couches arranged in a U shape around a low table. Servants moved gracefully between them, bringing dishes course after course. Musicians played, poets recited, dancers performed. For the hosts, this was a chance to display wealth, generosity, and refinement. To be invited was an honor, to host was a statement of status. These meals could stretch on for hours, and the food was often more abundant than anyone could eat. Exotic fruits, endless meats, pastries dripping with honey, wines flavored with rose petals, all paraded out in succession. The Romans even invented mechanical devices to surprise their guests, such as ceilings that dropped showers of flower petals or tables that rotated to reveal new courses. The dining room itself was a stage set with painted walls, mosaics, and silverware so fine it glittered like treasure. But beneath the beauty and elegance was also excess and vice. Philosophers like Seneca criticized the luxury of Rome's banquets. arguing that men had become slaves to their appetites. Satirists like Juvenal mocked the way nobles stuffed themselves while the poor went hungry. And yet, the banquets continued, because they were more than indulgence. They were political theatre. To host a feast was to secure allies, win favor, and display dominance. Guests often remembered not only the food, but the hierarchy who sat closest to the host, who was given the choicest cuts, who was made to wait. Roman dining culture reveals the empire's obsession with spectacle in every form, whether in the arena, in politics, or at the dinner table. Meals were another stage where Rome performed its greatness, its wealth, and its inequality. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of Roman food is how it reflected the empire itself. Rome did not just conquer land, it conquered flavors. A wealthy Roman's table was a map of the Mediterranean world and beyond. Spices like pepper traveled all the way from India. Dates and figs came from North Africa. Oysters were shipped from the chilly waters of Britain. Wine from Gaul, fish sauce from Spain, marble serving plates from Greece. Every bite carried the taste of conquest. To dine like a Roman elite was to literally consume the empire. Food was not just sustenance. It was politics and propaganda. When an emperor distributed free grain, it was a reminder of his power to feed the people. When generals returned from campaigns, they sometimes hosted victory banquets, featuring foods from the lands they had conquered. Culinary culture was a reflection of Rome's dominance. Even something as humble as olive oil reveals this vast amphorae of Spanish oil have been found in Rome, their fragments piled into artificial hills called Monte Testaccio, a mountain made entirely of broken jars that once carried food into the city. The reach of Rome meant that its elites could indulge in luxuries no single region could provide on its own. They lived in a culinary empire, their diets enriched by trade routes that stretched thousands of miles. But this abundance came at a cost. It required armies to secure borders, navies to guard shipping lanes, and slaves to produce and transport goods. Eating was an act of imperial consumption, supported by conquest and exploitation. When we look at Roman food, we are not just looking at cuisine, we are looking at a system of power, where every dish was a reminder of the empire's reach. So, what did the Romans eat? The answer is both simple and staggering. For the poor, it was bread, porridge, and vegetables. For the wealthy, it was dormice, flamingo, and endless banquets of spectacle. But beyond the ingredients and the recipes, Roman food tells us something bigger. It was a reflection of Rome itself, a world of extremes, of humble staples and extravagant luxuries, of unity through bread and empire through exotic flavors. The Roman table was where power, culture, and empire all came together. If you enjoyed this journey into the dining halls of ancient Rome, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode of Empire Remembered. And tell me in the comments, if you could try one Roman dish, would you go for the simple bread and olive oil? Or would you be brave enough to taste stuffed dormice?